Well, hello, community of listeners. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Worthy Podcast. If I can be honest, this episode probably didn't want to happen. I didn't want this episode to happen, and it was purely out of jealousy. And it's not because this guy is a fellow podcaster, because we'll talk about what he does here in a second. It is just truly out of jealousy because if you see this on the video, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But this dude has such a great head of hair that I'm super jealous because I don't. And I didn't want this to happen out of that reason. I am joined today by Walter Gaynor II. He is founder of BossLocks, but we'll get into that in a second. Walter is a problem solver who helps individuals and businesses do what they do best while reducing their stress. He does this by creating marketing and business solutions to help reach their new growth. He also uses his expertise to create a space to address the obstacles that Black employees and owners face in the workplace. And I love this part here. Using his insecurities, and we'll talk about this in a second, using his insecurities and curiosity, Walter created a platform to support Black people pursuing growth in their career as business owners and their natural hair journey. You know, I just said he is the host of BossLocks. It is a wildly popular podcast, and their mission is to redefine professionalism, elevate Black voices, and prove that natural hair and professionalism do coexist. Well, Walter, thank you for joining the Worthy Podcast, man.
Man, thank you for having me. It's actually like, people always say like, oh, I'm so glad to be here. But no, I'm for real glad to be here, man. I remember when he first made the offer, I was like, me? Really? Okay, yeah, let's do this. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited because, we have spoken, often. And typically when we have a conversation, it's about an hour, 2 hours long. And I think we only schedule it for like 30 minutes. And we tend to talk about just anything and everything. But I think the coolest thing for me has actually been able to see kind of your maturation, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, and also as a podcaster. Can you tell me, we're going to be talking to the audience today about the title that I've kind of talked a little bit about is like hairstyle. Is your hairstyle divisive, right? Because here we think about it in corporate America, we think about all the different things that are actually taking place. We talk about microaggressions. We talk about everything that's going to take place with social injustice. But I think one of the things that a lot of people don't address or don't think about is the idea that a person's hairstyle, whether it's dreadlocks like yourself or natural, how does that play a role within the world of being of professionalism? But more importantly, how do you think that corporate America actually sees that issue?
Yeah, it's so interesting we're having this conversation now because it's like everything in life is changing, and the level of attention and respect that I think with Black people are getting is starting to become a little bit more heightened. Of course, there's a long way to go. So, corporate America, American society, and really all around the world has had like very negative history when it comes to natural hair. Like back in like the 1700s in New Orleans, there's literally a law that made Black women cover their hair to symbolize whether they're a free slave or not. So it's like there's a long history that stems to hair, something that's so simple. It really has been divisive. And so now we're starting to see things like the Crown Act, which basically it prohibits companies and workplaces, schools, all these different professional environments from discriminating against natural hair. So we're seeing these laws come into place that counteract these like negative mindsets and attitudes towards professionalism. So now we're starting to see other companies falling in line, like UPS just lifted their ban against natural hair, but locks in particular in the workplace. And so we're starting to see corporations shift a bit, but it's interesting because hair is something that for a lot of people, when they first hear hair discrimination, like, what? No, that's not real. That's not real.
Right, right,
What?
right,
They're like,
right,
yo,
right,
get off your
right.
little pedestal. You're not a victim. All these things, but when it comes to hair discrimination, it's something that's it's often subtle. Like you don't always just walk around and people are like, your locks are gross. Oh, get out of here. No, it's like it's
Yeah.
very subtle, and I think that it's almost like it draws out a lot of other negative perceptions of Black people, of the
Right.
Latinx community, all these different communities who hold their hair with like certain importance and are kind of stuck to their or stick to their the cultural significance of hair. So it's there's a history of disrespect, starting to see a little bit more respect, but I think there's a lot of learning that still needs to happen.
Interesting. I think when you when I think about this subject, and of course, I don't have to deal with that aspect of it because it's just, I'm follically challenged. It is what it is. Um, but I remember, I think I remember the first time in corporate America when I had a young lady come into a meeting, and she was given a presentation. She was a consultant from an external company, and she came in to give the presentation. And when she walked in, you can almost hear the like everybody stopped breathing because she came in and she had these amazing locks, and she had them up, and but they were just beautiful. And but I can sense everybody. They're like, oh gosh, okay, what are we going to hear now, or what is this going to be? um and she provided the most value out of any of the presenters that we actually had that day.
Mm.
And I think that almost kind of like, I won't say demystified, but that also kind of shut down, I think, internally some of the people who were actually thinking internally, like, okay, here we go. What is that going to do? Have you, in your personal, professional career, how have you been able to deal with that? Because we're going to talk a little bit about your show, because I think it's important, and then talk about the people that you've actually had on your show, and then we'll also talk about working while Black. But I do want to hear your story, and I want the listeners to hear your story as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. It's interesting because I think for a lot of my life, I was one of the few Black people in certain environments. And for many people, like they shared afterwards, I was the first Black person that they interacted with. So from me just being Black in general to also having locks, there's been a lot of like interesting encounters and questions. And I think that something that a lot of Black people face is like it's the unspoken experiences that
Right.
they have, a certain attitude. So I think that for me, I know I've impressed a lot of people with things that aren't that impressive, because
Mm,
they start to think that like as they it's it's like when you walk into a room, people can't help but just start thinking and associating. It's like a mental thing to associate what they see with something that they know. So
mhm,
they kind
mhm,
of
mhm.
base things that they understand about what they think they understand about
Yeah.
people and start to put it onto you, and which is really unfair because like I shouldn't have to be a master at Excel to basically create a form or a table in it, but when they see it, it's like, oh my God, wow, it's so amazing, but it's really not that amazing. So I think there's an extra layer of pressure that's added. I know also there's a lot of disrespect, like the way that I've been treated in certain situations that I know that other of my other colleagues definitely were not treated like that. When
Mhm,
it comes to
mhm.
presenting ideas, you just have to, well, I've had to really just push them a lot harder than other people. I've definitely seen my ideas shared months later. Someone else mentioned them, was like, oh, genius. But when I share, it's like, oh man, there's all these things. I don't know if it could be done. So it's like there's a lot of obstacles that I know I've had to face, other people have had to face, where it's just that the expectations of me are either
Mhm.
so low or so high that it's impossible to meet. So either way, it's always like we're kind of fighting to just be average almost. Like it's that's I think kind of things I've experienced. And then when it comes to hair, it's kind of interesting because like I mentioned before, sometimes people don't really bluntly say anything about your hair, but
Right.
they
Right.
may think it. I know I've only had two direct instances where hair was clearly the issue, and one was when I was younger, like way younger, and working at a Jimmy John's, a sandwich shop,
Mm,
and it like I was one of the best employees. Like they tried to make me a manager within like me working there for like 2 months.
mm,
And when corporate comes down and they do all these like inspections and everything, we passed all these tests except for one checkbox, which is grooming, and it took some points off. And I was like the only black person there with locks, so it's definitely like directly me. Like, okay, everyone looked like, oh yeah, that's Walter, but
mm.
yeah. And then there's another instance where someone just directly asked me like, how important is your hair to you? And I was also when I was younger, and
Wow.
at the time I was just like, I
Wow.
mean, it's just hair, but I mean, I was just saying that to ease her mind, but
Right.
it's these little things here and there that really are kind of bigger things that really kind of subconsciously make you think like, okay, my hair isn't adequate or isn't as valuable as looking like someone else's hair, like a white person's hairstyle, or just having no hair at all. So there's a lot of unspoken rules and ways of life and ideas of what like professionalism looks like, and that's
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of why I pulled the words, like especially professionalism is such a high standard, because there's a lot of words and ideas and perspectives that really hold people back if you don't look like the person who's like in charge.
True. True. I know here is such a personal thing. Um, it truly is. Here's a question, and this um I this is not out of my ignorance because I know better and I know more, but I think that do you think the tendency for, let's say, white America, or say just society in general, anytime they think about locks, I often think the tendency is that they always just go back to Jamaica. They go back
Mm-hmm.
to reggae music, and they think about people who are actually either, smoking marijuana. They think about the lifestyle.
Yeah.
They think about um, laziness. They think about slackness, as they say over in Jamaica, right? Um, but it's not. It's so much deeper than that. But I think if I and I can't speak for society, but I would almost hazard a guess that that is almost the first thing that they think about, which is so sad because once again, there is still another level of ignorance and understanding that they don't even know about, dreadlock Rasta, right? They don't understand
Mm-hmm.
where the backstory, if you will, about dreadlocks. Can you provide maybe that um, delineation between, what they could possibly think in their mindsets when they may see somebody from with dreadlocks, and maybe their historical perspective, to kind of making the distinction between why you may wear your hair the way you wear your hair.
Mm. Very good question. Very good question. Also, let me say, I honestly feel like there's like no such thing as a dumb question.
Hmm.
So I know I'm someone who I'm like always open to questions about hair and stuff, and like it's different from people to people. But
True.
yeah, no, that's a very good question too. So I think the first thing that came to my mind was kind of associations. Like our mind, it's almost like a really cool thing that our mind works. Like we just when we see something that's maybe unfamiliar, we just start to think like, okay, what does that remind us of? It's a way like a shortcut of
Hmm.
thinking to
Hmm.
further learn. But I think the issue is that we kind of stop at like the first associations.
100%
So
agree.
I think when it comes to like reggae and like Jamaican culture and locks, it makes sense because of like Bob Marley was such a huge
Right.
figure, and I think for a lot of people, our only knowledge of Jamaican culture is Bob Marley. But I think that when it comes to locks, it almost does a disservice when we just stop there. It's
I
like
agree.
locks in particular, there's a long history of locks from back to like ancient Egypt and just all over the world. But there's what there's an emperor of Ethiopia, like way, way back in the day, who was captured by, I think, the Roman army. His name was
Hmm.
Selassie.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he was captured and held captive in this tower. And his army, his people, they were like, nah, this can't happen. So they just basically, as an act of protest, like sat outside where he's been captured and just stood there and like let their hair grow. into locks, almost as a form of like rebellion and resistance, really showing like, yeah, we're not going anywhere.
Mm.
And so, like, we think about Jamaican and locks, but really there's history of locks in Ethiopia. There's different tribes, like the Maasai tribe. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so please forgive
Hmm.
me. But they would do something really beautiful with their hair, like when it comes to locks, and just like use different nature to color their hair and
Right.
everything. So there's a really rich history of locks that goes
Hmm.
way past Jamaica, and really like having locks is even like a requirement of being Rastafari. And I will say, with that being said, I've definitely been asked by white people, black people, and Jamaican people if I'm Jamaican because they see my hair. So it makes sense. But yeah, there's a long history, a beautiful history of like natural hair locks from all over the world. So that's actually one of the projects I'm taking on, is to really dive through our history and just really
Excellent.
speak to like the culture and how like the different hairstyles associated with that culture. Because I think kind of goes back to associations. Like the more we start seeing more and more to pull from, we'll start to realize, okay, it's not just marijuana, Jamaican reggae music, all that stuff. Like when I
Right.
see someone with locks, it doesn't mean that they're this. They could be
Exactly.
this. And I know for me, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and there are a lot of people with locks there. People have them for different reasons. I know with me, I started them. It was literally like an impromptu decision. I was in middle school, came home from boarding school, and I was at home with my friend at his house, and we were just watching TV. And his dad came home. He's like, "Oh, what's up, Walter?" I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he stopped for a second. He just asked, like, "Hey, you want to try locks?" And I kind of thought, and I was like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it." So we went to the room. He came back with all this stuff to just get it started. And he's not like a hairstylist or anything like that. So I have no idea. He doesn't have locks. None of his kids have locks. Like he just, I don't know where he got this stuff. Like I like to think that
Interesting.
he came from the future and came back down like, this person here, he's going to start BossLocks. He's going to do something really impactful. So let me get this started right now. The time
That's
is
awesome.
perfect. So yeah, he just did them right there. So like for me, I think it at the time it wasn't anything this big huge decision. It was just a hairstyle that I liked and loved and wanted to try. Seeing it on different people and it looked nice. And it was also a opportunity for me to do something new with my hair. So I think a lot of people, especially like black men, well, black women as well, but when because of black men, like we often don't ever see our hair long. Like we don't know what it's like when it just grows out and out and out.
Right.
And so that was something that I don't mean to make you jealous,
No, that's okay,
but
man.
yeah,
No, that's okay. That's all right, dude. That's all
yeah.
right.
I'll make you a nice hairstyle one day. You can wear it on like a nice little sewing or something.
No.
But yeah, and it was at the time just an innocent decision, but it turned into an opportunity for me to see myself just grow in a way that was unique to me instead of me wanting to look like other people.
Yeah.
So
Interesting, because when I was you know, the reason I wanted them, I was actually in the Air Force, and so it was probably out of an act of rebellion at that time. I was 18 years old, 19, I think, at the time.
mm,
And one of the things, because you couldn't have hair in your face, but of course, as a black man, you would get, what the official term is pseudofolliculitis, which is razor bumps, right? And then
right.
you would actually have to get a waiver so that you can actually have a little bit of like a 5 hour shadow or whatever you want to call it, just a little bit, just so that you wouldn't get those razor bumps. But you had to get a waiver for that. Um, you at that point in time, you couldn't have earrings. They didn't want you as a guy in the service not to have earrings. But guess what we did? I rebelliously went out and we got a little earring, and then we had the little plastic thing that you can put in there so that you hold it closed, but it was clear. And
Oh yeah.
and so then I guess what happened on the weekends? We would put the earring in because then we go out. And so I wanted to try to grow dreadlocks at that time too, especially when I was about to get out. But man, I just couldn't. I mean, I had that male pattern baldness thing going on that I got from my dad, and just said forget about it. It just didn't happen. And so the reason I was saying I brought that up was because I think there was always a personal reason, why people want to do something with their hair, or they want to maybe not look like everybody else. And I think was my initial thought process too. Was like, I don't want to
Yeah.
look like everybody else. But then I shaved my hair one day, and I've been wearing a bald head ever since. Ever since I have never grown my hair out since I was 21 years old, and that's
Oh
been a
wow.
long time. I'm not even going to tell you how old I am, but but it has been a long time. I've never let my hair grow out, and more so because if I did, I would probably look like George Jefferson,
Oh yeah.
because it would just be on the sides and around, and that's not a good look.
Hey, it's all natural. We gotta bring it back. Bring back the George Jefferson.
That is not
Yeah. That's why it's
that
kind of
is
the
not
reverse
good.
for me because my dad was in the military, and so like either him or my uncles, like yeah, when every time I see it, time to shave it and everything. And I also always want to look like Michael Jordan too, so I had the clean bald cut and everything.
Yeah,
And yeah, man, so it's definitely the reverse. And I think also at the time, I probably just was it was an impromptu decision, but I know that when I was younger, went to school with a lot of white people, and they would always do certain things with the hair and dye and grow and all this stuff. And I was just like, man, like
right,
the stuff they were using, I couldn't use. And so it was almost like a admiration for being able to do stuff with the hair that I just
right.
wasn't able to do. So these locks, like over a period of time, it came to a realization like, okay, this is me doing something that's unique to me and continue to express myself that way. So it kind of turned into that self-expression slash rebellion as well.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch upon something that you spoke about earlier about how dreadlocks go back further than, of course, in Jamaica and
Mm-hmm.
Rastafarian culture. When I think about the movie Black Panther,
Yeah.
and I think about all the different hairstyles, and I think about the different cultures, and it just came to my mind that every tribe that was presented within Wakanda, they all had different hairstyles and they all had different ways of dressing and different things like
Yes.
that. And so I always think about, so to your point around how things go back so much further and have so much more meaning than just what we see at the surface level. And I don't I don't think that people want to do the mental work um, to move past that first impression that you wanted to say, that you talked about, and that unconscious bias, that initial
Mm-hmm.
unconscious bias, that trigger. And they're like, yeah, no, that's okay. Yep, all right. Yep, he's just Bob Marley, and and weed, and not thinking like, man, maybe this could be deeper. Maybe there's a deeper meaning why he's wearing his hair like that. And so I don't know. I just thought about that when you said about that. It goes back a little further. I think about that blockbuster of a movie that had
Mm-hmm.
black culture on display that was just so prominent. And so just another kind of jumping off point.
Oh yeah, yeah. That movie was impactful. You know, another movie actually that just came out is a Christmas movie. Great movie for family too, but it's called what's it called? Jingle Jangle. And what I think was so amazing about that movie was that the cast was mostly black, and the hairstyles in that
Mm,
movie, yo, it was amazing. I could just only imagine like being a child watching that movie, especially if I was like like young girls like watching that movie because there's a lot of more women with different types of styles of their hair and everything, and that's just so impactful because you really see what you can do. And kind of
right.
goes back to the associations thing, like so part of what I'm doing is really to show that does go beyond just Jamaican, reggae, Bob Marley, and all that, but also for Black people to see all these different things so that we can start associating ourselves with all these different things that we can be. And it's like Black Panther is definitely like a strong one like that. And now I'm seeing and start to see a lot more examples and representations that we can see, so they could really so that we know that we have options. So it's like
Absolutely.
it goes deep. It goes
It
deep.
does. It does. And so let's segue into Boss Locks, right?
Yeah.
In your show, watched several episodes doing my homework. Man, you got some really cool people on there,
Oh
and
man.
in each and every one I'm jealous of, right? Because they're all, just got all both of you. You guys are like throwing your hair back and talking about different, techniques and I'm just like, I can't do any of that stuff. But what's more important is the conversations that you have,
Mhm.
the level of people that you have on the show, and how professors, CEOs, and how they're talking about, you know, their experiences, with their hair. But why Boss Logs, and why is Boss Logs so important to not just Black culture, but I just think culture in general?
Mm. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it is just like it's kind of for everyone, made for Black people, but really the result of what I produce is for everyone to learn from because it's almost like a message. So when I was graduating from college and I had locks and I already had some experiences where my hair was kind of questioned in professional environments, but my senior year I started having more conversations with people and I was going to urge, hey, you're going to have to cut your hair if you want to really
Right.
make it in
Right.
this world. But I knew I wasn't going to cut them. I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm good, everything like that. But one friend, he mentioned like, yo, can you name one CEO that didn't come from entertainment or sports like that,
Yeah.
who came a CEO and big time too, like Mark Cuban level, and I couldn't name a single person. And matter of fact, what's even worse than that, the only Black CEO that I could name was Damon John. And I just felt like, man, that's crazy. Like I look up to all these people who don't look like me at all. So I started
Right.
doing some searching, and I was like, man, I could find people pretty bet.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anything at all. I looked through Google and only found one article from 2008, and it was about a man who it was actually about a man who didn't cut his locks and was doing well in his at his job, but that was
Hmm.
literally the only thing I found. And so I was thinking, like, okay, I know it's possible because I know I can do the things I say I could do. I've gone through school. I know this stuff, but I didn't know how to get past the kind of the first impression that people had of
Hmm.
people with
Hmm.
locks in these interviews and the workplace. So I literally just started asking people that I knew, which was like three people who had
Hmm.
locks or in professional environments. One was a CEO, so he really just lived by his own rules. So they
Right.
was doing it that
Right.
way. Another, she was in banking, but she always kept her hair covered and she didn't go by her first name because she was worried about it, being too Black and everything like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
another person I spoke to, she was an employee and she was doing just fine. She was unapologetically herself. So I just started having conversations with people, and my dad really encouraged me to actually do something with it.
Right.
And I
Right.
didn't know what it was, but I did know that I was searching for bosses with locks to really learn how they got to where they are today. And that's really how it started. Just me trying to figure out how I could succeed and thrive and just be okay, not necessarily like the best of the best, but just make it. And after a lot of encouragement from people, realized that other people would probably benefit from hearing these things too.
Hmm.
And that's how BossLocks was born, just as a way to show other people that there are Black people in professional environments with locks living their best life or at least managing, so you can too. Like it's impossible for that to happen without you having to cut your locks, without having to conform and any of that things. So that was the initial mission and it still is that today, but it just became something so much more from
Yeah.
just conversations of self-esteem, like self-acceptance, self-love, and also really the unlearning, which I think is the most important part because the main mission is redefining professionalism. And I say that because the word professional and professionalism is used, has been used, is used, and probably will still be used for a period of time to really hold people to a certain image of what it looks like. And for all of this civilization, like the whole history of America, what professional looks like is really a European perspective, like basically looking like a white person, from your hairstyle to what this your skin color to how you walk, talk, dress, all this stuff. You have to look white. So really, I'm taking that word professionalism and taking away all that negative association. Well, not negative association, but very specific
Hmm. Hmm.
association, and
Hmm.
really getting to the root of it. So turn into that. It turned into unlearning these ideas that we've just taken over years of just abuse, slavery, discrimination, segregation, and just really trying to survive. Like sometimes I speak to my grandmother and like I could see what she's had to do just to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sucks that she still has certain viewpoints, but she's in the process of unlearning herself because now
Right.
times are a little bit different. So that's kind of the things that I'm looking to do. Just showcase, represent people and all the different careers that they've gone through. Show that these are Black people in these high places, and really just start these conversations of unlearning these negative thoughts, mindsets that we've had towards ourselves, that white
Hmm.
people have
Hmm.
had towards Black people, just subconsciously.
Right.
and all the above. So unlearning, relearning, and striving for new growth. That's what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I did a I did an episode a while back with two executives, Jenna Cross and Linker Mills, and we were talking a little bit about CEOs and executives taking action against racial injustice.
Hmm.
And one of the things that came out of that conversation was the idea or the phrase that people typically will use when they're hiring and looking at talent is the phrase cultural fit.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
would say, is this person, are they truly like a cultural fit within our organization? And I almost think about that was code for, well, do they look like us? Did they go to the
Yeah.
same school that we went to? Are they part of the same clubs that we've gone to? Are they alumni? Right, all these different things. I almost think that the word professionalism, to some degree, almost is almost code in a similar way, where that it's if you aren't part of that cultural fit from a professional standpoint, then I'm not sure, you may be bucking the trend, or wow, if we bring Walter on board, we may lose that client because maybe that client can't receive what Walter may have to deliver professionally. And so I often think that word sometimes can also be code for quote that whole idea about cultural fit as well too, to kind of like negate um, entrance into
Hmm.
an organization or at a certain level as well.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think you made a really good point as well. Like when bringing someone on and them being client facing, so
Mm,
interacting directly with that company's clients, because sometimes it
absolutely.
could be, I'll give you an example of like Jimmy John's. When I worked there, they never had a problem with me, but what started to happen when the corporate trainers came to do their inspections, they'd be like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, just come a little bit later," something like that, or just don't come that day. So it's kind of this fear of it's it's a combination of things. They're afraid of harm for their own
Hmm.
company, their own brand themselves,
Right.
and they also didn't feel the need to really step up and kind of protect me in that situation, or stand up and be like, no, no, this is our, he's a great employee, all these things, we're keeping him, stop with these checks against us, these marks against us for something that's ridiculous like hair, but they didn't do that. So I think that a lot of companies, it's like a couple of things. They kind of fear the type of interactions they'll get from other people. They
Hmm.
fear the change it'll take in their culture. So like the whole culture fit thing, like bringing on a black person is going to freak everything up. But it's kind of crazy because when you think about culturally fit, I think you're right. It is code, so it's professionalism, but like I think the culture is really set by the leadership. And
Agree.
why
Agree.
would you want a culture that just stays the same? Like, I think one thing that's really important that people miss when it comes to like diversity and all this stuff is like being okay for things to change and be fluid and really represent what you really, really want, which is like a great work environment for people to
Mm.
really thrive. And I think like yeah, it's almost like that cultural fit thing. It's almost like do you talk like us, look like us, listen to the same music, watch the same movies? Do you
Hmm.
act like
Hmm.
us? Because I only want to be with
Hmm.
people who are like us, and that's ridiculous. Because that's how ideas get stale. Like if you're not open to new things, like you're always gonna have that stale.
Oh,
Just it's old fashioned. You need to have fresh ideas all the time. You can't get that if you're only looking within yourself. Like you got to step outside your room, go down like across the street, check out other things to get new ideas and fresh perspectives, because it's just otherwise you're just sitting in the same spot forever.
there was a post, and I can't remember who posted it. Gosh, it was on LinkedIn, but I've seen it several times. It was a young woman, black woman. She's in an interview, and so it's a cartoon, and if you will, and then she's across from the table is just a whole group of the people who are interviewing her, and they're all
Mm.
white guys. I mean, there's probably like 30 or 40.
Yeah.
There's like 30 or 40 of them, and she's the only person that's sitting there at the table. And the interviewer asks her, "So, what are you going to bring to the company?" And I just thought that was so interesting because if you looked across at the table, everybody just looked alike. They were all the same. They all the same age. here it is, this young black woman trying to interview, and their question was, well, what are you going to bring? What are you going to bring to the table? And I was just like, wow, that's so, like, when I think about what's kind of taking place sometimes when that's what organizations are thinking about, whether they're thinking about BossLocks or they're thinking about, black and minority people, they often think like, what are you going to bring to this organization? And I think it's such a bad question.
Mm,
I think it's a horrible question, and I think the real question is that you just said it earlier, is that, and I think it's sad, is that these organizations are missing out on the richness of new ideas and perspective, and talent and thought leadership.
mm,
But they're so they're so their culture is so ingrained that I'm not sure what Walter can kind of bring to the table. I think we'll be
right.
fine. I think we'll be fine. And we've been doing it this way for 32, 35 years. I don't feel the need to change, but I just often think that's a sad commentary for a lot of organizations who are turning really great talent away, um, just because they don't look like, they don't, they're not part of the culturally fit,
Right.
phenomenon, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly that. It really is sad because it's almost like sometimes I just think like you don't even know what you're kind of missing out on. Like you're just kind of stuck on this, but there's a whole another side of things. Like just besides the job skills, when you bring someone on who's from a different culture, then you just get a whole new mindset. And when you think about bringing in a whole new mindset to an organization, that's an opportunity for you to just improve on like the money you make, because you could just start thinking of things like okay, we're doing it this way, but oh, this person who has this whole new mindset and experience, he's like, okay, you can actually implement this, or you can start targeting these type of people. You just add a lot more flavor to what you offer.
Yeah.
It's like well, it's like bringing different seasonings to like what you're cooking and everything like that, you
It
know?
is.
Yeah.
It is. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Yeah. But
you know,
yeah, it's like it I don't know. It's really interesting because I don't know. I think people are afraid, kind of back to the fear thing, but just afraid of change, afraid of being open to something new. Because I think another thing is that when you bring on someone who's from a different culture, and I know this from first and experiences and stuff like that, people are like, oh, okay, we can't say these things. You have to walk on eggshells now. Or they're thinking like, okay, we have this black person, so now we might have to start addressing like racism. I remember this one instance, like it was actually a real like chill conversation. It wasn't even that deep, just about, I think, what was it? Something about racism. I remember the person that was in charge kind of walked in. He's just kind of freaking out, like, yeah, we're not talking about this. And he just run away and stuff like that. So it's like the fear of being a Karen, or fear of like saying something racist when in turn, like you just, people just got to relax and be open and be comfortable. Like, yeah, I might not know about this culture, but this is a great opportunity to learn. Not necessarily from that person, but for me to do the extra work, just learn something else, or just listen. Sometimes when it comes to learning, you don't have to do anything extra. You just have to listen, ask simple, non-invasive questions,
Mhm.
and just accept the new information. So,
That's it. I often think, I mean, that's so, you know, talking about that, I think about companies at the beginning of this year, and we won't go too in depth in that because I want to get back to Boss Locks here in a second, but I did want to get your perspective on this. Is that we had so many organizations coming out at the very beginning of all of the racial injustice that actually took place earlier this year, and they were making all these statements. And I often said, okay, that's great. I love that some of these companies are making statements, but a lot of them aren't taking action. But the underpinning question that I always had was, what was your perspective before, right?
mhm.
Why do you feel the need to come out now and say it? To your point about we have an organization, you go to an organization and people are saying, oh, well, now we have to be, careful about what we say, about what we do. But what were you saying and doing before you had a person, black in the minority, was in your organization, right? What was the culture? What was, what was that verbiage? What was those conversations that were taking place? Did you just feel it was okay to maybe say a little joke here and there or whatever, and it wasn't a big thing? But now you actually have somebody within that organization or on that team, and you can't take that same mindset. And so
Mhm.
I often think you have to go back a level, right, to your culture, to your corporate culture, your communication culture within there, because if you have the corporate culture, but then you also have the communication culture that's within that organization, and
Yeah.
that's how things are what's allowed to be said and what's not allowed to be said. And so
Hmm.
that's the part that really frustrates me the most when I just think about organizations is that aspect, is because they get so fixated on, making a statement and saying that this is, we're against this, we're against that. But man, what were you thinking beforehand?
Right.
And what actions have you been taking? Because a lot of them have just made that statement and they haven't done anything at
That's
all, at all.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I know me personally, all those companies that posted the black square, that was the first thing black they ever posted on Instagram. I'm definitely keeping track of them. Be like, okay, you did that. Great job. Great first step, So for one, I was like to say, I applaud everyone for taking that great first step and welcoming into the world of um, people other than look like you. But now it is a combination of what were you doing before, but now what are you doing now? Like I think it's very easy to do things like posting Black Lives Matter, but
Mm,
it's not enough because that'll just get swept up in the algorithm. Like now we have this whole like
yes.
politics thing and everyone's like this or that. So I think it's what have you done before? Why are you doing this now? And what are you doing afterwards? And I don't think it's like all of a sudden you have to do everything right now
Correct.
because I think
Correct.
that's impossible. But it's a process, it's a journey. Like, what is your organization going to look like 2 years from 2020? Like, what's everything going to look like in 2022? That's kind of the things I'm looking at now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know one person I interviewed on my show, Monique Russell, she mentioned she looks at the process of learning and growth almost through like learning your history. So really looking at your past.
Right.
Because she was speaking about her own personal experience from unlearning the negative associations she had towards other black people. But I think with companies, really the same thing. Because I think like we all have to be honest. Like we've all said like sort of like messed up things or had some messed
Yeah.
up thoughts in the past. Like
Correct.
it's
Correct.
just how it happens, and life has changed, and we've been brought with new experiences, and it's like okay, we gotta just accept that's what it was. We don't necessarily have to like publicize everything that we did before, but we just have to accept like that's what it was and be okay with transitioning to something new. Like it's not that hard not to say something racist, if you really have to just bottle it up and wait till you get home. But just you have to start being okay with like changing how you present into the world and how you speak to different people, how you think about different people, and really just starting to put other people in places of power. There's Charlemagne
Mm,
the God, he once said, when it comes to real equality, it's not just about like hiring a black person, but like as soon as you trust someone to make a decision that affects your life, that's when I
yes.
think that real equality comes. Like when you really have black people on leadership, not just as a diversity officer, but as like the chief operations officer, the CEO, like that's when
Right.
you're going to see
Right.
some quality in your organization. So it's definitely a process, but it's great to tweet Black Lives Matter, but you really have to make it matter in
You
your own
you do
place.
you do you have to do your part. One of the things that stands out, whenever you are interviewing someone and they're I'm going back to BossLocks, and then we'll finish up talking about working on black, because I think that's so
Mm-hmm.
important, and how what that's gonna look like for you in 2021. But and one of the things that stands out, and you said it earlier, every time I'm listening to someone talk and speak about um, their locks. We talked a little bit about that it's personal, but there is this level of, I wrote it down, of self-esteem, high self-esteem and self-love that comes
Mm-hmm.
out whenever they're talking, whenever they're speaking about it. It's this is unashamed, unashamed essence of authenticity of like who they are. And it's not even an attitude of like, take this is me, take it or leave it. It is just this sureness of who they are. um how does that, because I think that's the other side of it too. When you think about Black and minority leaders too, sometimes that we may shy away. I talked a lot about, as you know, about imposter syndrome and what that, and how does that play a role within your leadership journey? How
Mhm.
how do you feel like some of these people that you've actually had on your show, how do you think they've been able to cultivate that mindset of being, that high self-love and high self-esteem?
That's a good question. That's a really good question because I think a lot of people are still doing it. Like I know for me, it's a daily thing. Like
Yeah.
I know from my lock journey to starting and growing BossLocks to entrepreneurial things, it's really like a continued journey of self acceptance. And I know one thing that's kind of common among people with locks is like as the years grow, your locks get longer, you get more comfortable with how you are, how you present, and all these other things. So like that question is actually really interesting because I remember actually a few days ago, actually, I was just thinking about like, just saying Black Lives Matter or Black is beautiful, Black power. I think a lot of people will hear these things and are like, well, what about me? What about white people? What about all this stuff? And it's almost like these things, they sound almost like supremacist type of ideas, but really, it's really a message to us saying that our Black is beautiful. Like me being a Black person is beautiful and good and all that stuff. Black Lives Matter is good. My hair is beautiful. All these things because it's almost like a reminder to ourselves because we were constantly being shown all these examples of how people who don't look like us are better than
Right.
us.
Right.
So this journey of self acceptance and esteem, it's really it's almost like a full time job, and you have to have a lot of different reminders, practices that you do on the regular because it's easy to forget. I know one thing I really appreciate about your show is that those episodes you did on imposter syndrome because
Mm.
that's something I've learned about myself, I think, in the past year and still learning how to continue to kind of battle it to really understand that like I am the right person for what I'm doing and I do bring value to the table.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just a constant reminder, constant practice. A lot of mantras, a lot of mantras.
A lot of mantras. And I lied. I do have one more question before we get into working my Black. So in the intro, I read, using his insecurities and curiosity. Um, I think you and I had a conversation, the other, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. We were talking a little bit about like how you were kind of finding yourself and finding your groove. Um,
Hmm.
could you talk a little bit about um, insecurities and curiosity? Because the everybody who probably listens to someone on the podcast, they will probably often think that we don't struggle maybe with imposter syndrome. Other podcasters, right? Interviewers, or all these other
Hmm.
people, we all know the truth, right? We all deal with it from time to time in certain situations,
Right.
and we all understand we have some insecurities. But I've always appreciated, even in our conversations, that you will allow like some of your insecurities and that curiosity kind of um, come to the forefront. Why do you think that is so important for people to know that about you, but also how they can actually kind of embrace, that mindset of being of understanding that they do have some insecurities, and that they can also cultivate curiosity at the same time?
Yeah, another good question from Steve Worthy. Yeah, man. So, well, one, I definitely have to shout out Justana McDaniel, who the first episode I published on the podcast was her, and she was also one of the first people I ever spoke to about this crazy idea that natural hair and professionalism can coexist. And she's always spoken about authenticity and bringing power to it. So I think that it's sharing kind of some of the insecurities I have and everything. It's a couple of things. One, it's me being more comfortable with who I am, but it's
Yeah.
also, I think, I don't know. I think that we've had this obsession with being perfect, and it's ridiculous
Mm,
because even people who are perfect are kind of like they got stuff going on. They're kind of messed up here and there, and it's a lot of pressure to be perfect, and it's kind of crazy. So for me, continuing to share and be open about different insecurities like imposter syndrome, it's kind of funny because I almost feel kind of corny sometimes sharing things like imposter syndrome because it's like almost like a buzzword now, but it's the
yeah,
honest
yeah,
truth. And I think
yeah.
one, it's a way of me being open and comfortable with who I am and then being able to grow from that. But then also other people listening, like just the fact that I started a podcast, like that's a crazy idea that a lot of people like were the environments I grew up in, like no one would ever assume like, okay, me myself, I could start a podcast, but it's something that anyone can do. So I like to share all these things because I want other people to start doing it themselves and go after things they
Hmm.
really want to do. Because not everyone wants to do the things that they're doing, but they really want to do other things to get more creative, but they
True.
don't know how or don't think it's really profitable. So I'm trying to just show that it literally can be done. This is how it's done. Get started. It's not easy, but you can do it. And then things like imposter syndrome, I started speaking about it on the podcast, and then other people are like, hold on, whoa, I think I experienced that too.
Right.
That's something too. And so when you start sharing it, and then other people feel more comfortable sharing what they've experienced, there's like this. That's basically knowledge being shared, and once you have more
Exactly.
knowledge of yourself, bro,
Exactly.
you kill it. You kill it. Yeah, you could really go after and do the things that you want to do without having this idea. It's like if I wanted to be LeBron James, yo,
Hmm.
I'm saying I have to be
Hmm.
perfect, just like LeBron James. I can't do that. I'm not as tall as LeBron James. I maybe used to be faster than, but I'm definitely not faster than him now. Not stronger than him now. Like I can't do what he does, and that's okay because now maybe I'm more like a Rondo when it comes to playing basketball. And so there's different ways you go about doing it, but you have to be honest with what you can do and then strive for more
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually just a little bit upset that you didn't use Michael Jordan for that example.
Oh, I was thinking Michael Jordan at first, but I switched. I
No, no,
switched.
Matt, you should have, because that's the goat, and I think we had a conversation a little bit about that, but that's a whole nother episode too,
Yeah.
that we will not address, but that's okay. That is okay, anyway. So, you know, I I uh I wrote an article a while ago. I haven't published it yet because once again that imposter syndrome is kicked in. But I'm okay with it now. I'm actually going to publish it probably in probably not, holiday season. People are going to be busy. I got this whole 2021 launch that I'm trying to do with a whole bunch of things, and it's
Nice.
and it's talk about black leadership in retail,
Mm.
and it addresses the idea about companies who start um, businesses, big companies, larger companies that have organizations that have units in Black communities, and
Mm.
how they are actually doing them a massive disservice. But it also talks about the Black leaders who are running a lot of these, businesses and organizations within the Black community, and how they truly love what they do, and how they truly love the organization, however, they feel like the organization doesn't love them back, and that the companies are strictly probably in the Black communities just to say that they actually have a presence. And I also address what it takes to run a one of these business units within the Black community, because there's a different skill set than, running a retail establishment, same company, in the Black community than there is in the rural community and in the suburbs. And some people will say, "Well, no, it's not." Well, the standards should be the same. Just in my professional career, I've always strived to make the standards the same, but there is a different mindset, and that is, you you cannot deny that. No one can deny that it takes a different skill set and personality type to run an organization or store within the Black community as it compared to suburban or rural community. It just doesn't. So
Hmm.
it leads me to the question of your organization, um, and your platform movement, if you will, about working while Black. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that that's um, I know we talk about it. We talk about it amongst ourselves as black people sometimes, but I think my audience is diverse as well. So it's not just, even though I have a whole bunch of white folks that listen to the show, which is awesome, and I appreciate everybody and all the community of listeners. But I think there is something to truly be said about
Mm.
working while black, and I love to hear a little bit more, have them hear a little bit more about your platform and what that looks like.
Yes, yes. By the way, I cannot wait till that article comes out.
Oh,
That's gonna be dope. I will share it everywhere. I cannot wait. So yes, working while black, and also to everyone listening who's not black, I would like to say a couple things too. One, it's that's okay and that's awesome. I think that we're all in this together, so it takes
hmm,
everyone to come together and learn. And I have a lot of white people listening to BossLocks as well. I have a lot of white friends, a lot of it's so it's I think one when and I want to say that first before talking about working while black, because it's not about divisiveness like us
correct,
versus you, all these other
correct.
things. Working while black created as a place for black people to come together, because it's a lot different working as a black person in a certain organization or serving the black community than it is others. And there's a lot of things that we experience that other people just will not experience. Like I had someone share a story with me about when they deposited a check and had the cops called on them. Like
Mm,
when does that happen, when a bank is receiving money and they're looking at the amount and like, no, that can't be right. Call the cops. This person's a fraud somehow. I don't know. But there's all these different things that we just don't think about. Oftentimes the struggle when it comes to being a black business owner or just being a black employee is kind of access to resources, capital, education. Those things are real, but there's also all these other things that, like the story you mentioned earlier when that woman came in to present the consultant, and you kind of tell like there's a little tenseness there. And I'm 100% sure she felt it too, has felt it
correct.
before, and probably will still feel it. So it's a place for black people to come together to talk about their experiences and find a solution that'll kind of solve these problems that we have. And
Hmm.
basically, it's really more so of about preparation and being proactive, because there's unfortunately, like, racism isn't going away today, tomorrow. Working towards that, and I am an optimist, but I think that people will still experience things. Like someone here in Atlanta, like I'm not going to experience certain things that someone out in like Ohio is going to experience.
Right.
So it's and that's okay. But I think that as soon as we stop sharing with each other, we're just doomed. So we need to really come together to share more and put other people on, and not just hold all these secrets to ourselves. We really need to share. Like I'm trying to build something so that the next wave, the next generation, people who are like 2 years old now can be like 25 and leading Geico or something like that.
Mm,
Just really putting each other in positions to be prepared to take advantage of opportunities. And also, once we really come together, we can be out in the world and really better serve the people we work with and have a better experience, one for ourselves, and also be able to handle situations in a better light. Be able to speak to certain white people who are asking questions. Like for a while, I was very uncomfortable about talking about race and all these other things and my own
hmm, hmm,
experience with white people. But as soon as I
hmm.
started speaking with other black people, I'm like, okay, now I'm more comfortable to go out and present in these other spaces. So it's a safe place, a place for us to come together, connect, learn, and grow, share resources, really talk about the true
Hmm.
things that we experience, so that when we go out into other environments we can add more flavor to the conversations. Like there's also things that we just can't talk about with other people yet, because there's still things that we have to unlearn and break down, like just about being black, and how we should be black and all these other things, like these should and these one ways to be. It's all conforming. Like there's so many ways to conform even with our own culture. So it's a place to really break all that down, bring all like the fakeness away, and just be
Right.
real, authentic, and learn. So
Yeah.
that's what working while black is.
Excellent. Well, I did an interview with Craig Sawyer of the Biz Reveal. So it was a
Oh,
two-part
nice.
series, and it was awesome. And so we're talking about um, culture and executive coaching, and then we did another conversation about diversity in the workplace, and it was just a really great conversation. And Craig's white, And Craig had this authenticity about really wanting to know, like not so much what it was to be black, but well, why are you struggling with that, or why does this happen? And I was able to almost break it down in this one kind of instance, and I think it opened up his mind to a lot of other things. And I said, I said, Craig, I said, honestly, there's one thing I am always 100% every day of the week aware of my blackness. Every day, every
Mhm.
day. There's not a day that goes by that I am not aware that I am black, whether it's in the workplace, and then even more so when I leave the workplace and I'm driving, a car, or I'm coming back into my nice neighborhood and being followed or whatever. I am 100% aware, whether I'm giving a speech, whether I'm doing an executive coaching session, right, with someone who doesn't look like me, or I'm doing a workshop with it with when my audience is 100% is. But that doesn't stop me from being excellent and being who I am. I said, but I am completely 100% always aware of that. And I think his response was that I don't think he's ever had to think about being white. I don't think
Mhm.
he's ever had to constantly to consistently think about being white. Like, and I was just like, and it was a rich moment for both of us, because, and he wasn't being negative about about being white or who he was. He's just, I've never had to think about it that way, Steve. And I was like, no, I know. And that's what we're trying to, with the crux of our conversation was that, we were asking, he asked a lot of questions that a lot of white folks wanted to ask people, or ask a black person. And that's how we kind of approached it. And I wasn't
Mhm.
trying to speak for every black person. I was speaking for Steve and my perspective and my years and
Right.
everything that I've had to deal with. But I always thought that was interesting, and I wanted to. And when so I think about working while black, I think a lot of your listeners in BossLocks, and then I think their mindset is always in that context of like, I am always 100% aware of who I am,
Mhm.
and that and some of that self-love and some of that self-esteem is almost kind of born out of like understanding who you are and who you are as a black person, the adaptability that comes along with it, the ability to understand different things. And Perry Rue, executive coach, we were just talking about being bicultural as an executive coach, and we
Mhm.
were talking in the context about how do you, the fact of growing up, and when we did, and you said something earlier about like, being able to adapt, understanding who you are 100% as a black person, but being able to delve in and deal in other situations with white people, Spanish people, and um and actually have some measure of success. And when you get to the point where people say, "Oh my gosh, well, you sound white," because your vocabulary and all these other different things. And
Oh
listen
yeah.
to me, I'm 100% uh, 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 aware of who I am as a black person, but I do understand your culture as well, and how to do the professional culture, the
Mhm.
professionalism we talked about, the cultural fit. We understand what that means, and we understand how to deal with that. So, being bicultural. So, I said all that to say is that the white working while black piece for you from a movement standpoint is going to be so poignant, not just this year, but I just think next year. And I am super excited about what what that's going to do, and that platform is going to be for you and Boss Locks, and everything that you're doing. In closing, could you give the listeners, and not just my listeners but your listeners as well, who are going to be listening to this, 2021, right, man, wow, right, everybody had their
Mhm.
plans in January of 2020, right?
Yeah.
Everybody had the T-shirt 2020, the year of vision, and yada yada yada, and all of that stuff, and then boom, right? The floor just dropped from underneath everybody, right? And it caused us to pause and to kind of figure things out. Um, I would love to, whether it's words of encouragement, or it's takeaways, or it's something that you can give people to look forward to in 2021, or how can they get the best out of themselves in 2021?
Yeah. This year has been interesting, and I kind of look at it as the year of renovation. A lot of, and I started thinking about
Mm,
this after this restaurant I was trying to pick up food from, like way back in like March or April. I was like, yeah, we're closed next 2 weeks of renovation. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like in this period of time where everyone's kind of locked down, you're noticing, okay, we have time to change the insides of the business to make it even better. Because they can't have people coming in, so let's fix it up. Let's do something and get prepared for next time to make it better. And that's kind of what I look at 2020 as, like, because this
mm,
year forced me to stop everything and just sit with nothing but myself and look like, okay, this is me. This is what I have. This is what I don't have. I want that. How do I get to that? So I think that when you know, it's kind of funny. Everyone, including myself, looks at what we want to be and expects that to be reality right now, but that's kind of crazy.
yes.
So I would say for everyone, what I'm doing right now is just working on the little, almost like non-important things, but they really are big. But working on the little things to really prepare me for what's next. Because like what I'm working on now, like depending on COVID and everything, and if everything is good, I want to start doing like live working while black events and then really go on a whole tour with it. But I can't just like snap my finger to go do that. Let's do all these like little things now to prepare. So I think
Right.
for everyone now, I think really it's important to look at what you want to become and then be realistic and think, okay, what is it going to take to get there? I can't get that in a month, but okay, maybe it could happen in 3 months from now, or maybe 6 months, maybe like a couple of years. But it's all about doing the little things now. I was working with this company who was preparing for the fourth quarter, and they were saying like, "Yo, fourth quarter is going to be crazy right now with COVID and everything, but we have to do everything correctly, like execute at a
Yes.
high level. And that
Yes.
means all these little things that we're putting off, we got to get them done now so that we're prepared. So I think that's kind of like what we need to start looking at now. It's like, what are all the little things? What can we realistically do in a realistic amount of time? And let's really get it. And so I say that. And then also I want to say, just be comfortable with where you are now and accept
Mm,
it and just be
mm.
okay with it. Cause I think once you accept where you are, you can approach where you want to be. So those are my two things.
Excellent, man. Excellent. Excellent. Well, tell people how this will all be in the show notes, and this will all be, um, for everybody to grab hold of. But I do want to talk a little bit about, like, how can people find you? How can they find your show? And all of those good things.
Yes, yes. Yes, search for BossLocks everywhere. That's BossLocks. The K is important. It stands for knowledge itself. But search for BossLocks everywhere, literally everywhere where you listen to music, like YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, all these great places. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and the Working While Black group. There's a lot of groups out there, but one thing I noticed that they're not all active. So I made it real easy. If you search for Boss Locks Working While Black, you'll find that group on Facebook. Also on LinkedIn too. I'm trying to be anywhere that you might be just to meet you halfway, basically. So just search like that.
Excellent, excellent. We was moving. I'm trying to move this thing up. There we go. All right, this looks a little better. Walter, I want to thank you so much for being on the Worthy Podcast. I had a great time. This was long overdue, but I'm excited that we actually got this opportunity to kind of talk about Boss Locks, talk about working around Black, but more importantly, I think to hear your story. Right, I always think that it's important to hear, the guests and their story, and your story of vulnerability, your story of owning whatever levels of insecurity that you may have. But then the other thing is to be curious, right? And that curiosity has brought you to the person that you are today, the entrepreneur that you are today, the visionary that you are today. And I think people can take a lesson from that, and embracing who you truly are, because you never know what you can do. But I often say is that be you and they will come. So thanks again for being on the Worthy Podcast. Have a great day.